welcome once more everyone here at the conference. Without any long speeches ahead before we start our proceedings, I have prepared something. I will read. I will be the last one. But before I read my introduction or opening address, I would like to first invite the director of the Institute Nova Revija for the Humanities, Mr. Tomaž Zalaznik, to say a few words to open the conference. Thank you.
Dear colleagues and participants of the conference, when we started planning a conference in cooperation with Central and East European Society for Phenomenology at our institute in 2020, during the period of COVID, we had no idea how extensive project we are planning. A year later, in December 2021, over 70 colleagues attended the conference Phenomenology and Sociality. Unfortunately, due to COVID, not in Ljubljana as we had planned, but via Zoom. Last year, the conference was upgraded by the publishing the proceeding, Thinking Togetherness, in which 32 phenomenologists published their contributions, and today's conference is another achievement. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank Christian Ciochan from Central and East European Society for Phenomenology for all cooperation so far, and especially Andrej Božič, who not only took care of the entire project all these years, but also organized and managed it. I assume that Christian Ciochan and Andrej Božič will continue to talk about the conference itself, so I wish you all a good and successful conference, and stay in Ljubljana. Please.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask Professor Christian Ciochan to, as the current president of the Central and East European Society, to say a few words on behalf of the society.
Thank you very much, Andrej, and thank you for inviting us in this conference, in this event. I must say that the merits of the previous conference also are to my colleagues who are in the previous executive committee, Witold and all this, who are here, and now together with Jaroslava and Andrej, we try to continue and what was started in a few years ago, and we hope that with this society we will overcome this atomization among us, and we start to build a concrete togetherness, a concrete philosophical sociality. And I have no other things to say, just thank you for being here, and let's work together in the future as well. Thank you.
Spoštovani kolegi, dragi gostje, esteemed colleagues, dear guests, it is for me a distinct honor and a true pleasure to be able, on behalf of the organizer, the Institute Nova Revija for the Humanities, to extend to you all a heartfelt welcome to the present scholarly gathering dedicated to phenomenology of sociality in Central and Eastern Europe, which we have entitled On the Traces of Togetherness. As was already mentioned, in 2021, the Institute organized the annual conference of the Central and East European Society for Phenomenology, CESP, due to the circumstances of the COVID-19 crisis as an online event. However, on the basis of presented contributions dealing with the complex theme of the phenomenological approach to the question of the social dimension of human dwelling in the world, I subsequently edited the relatively recently published scientific monograph, Thinking Togetherness, Phenomenology and Sociality. It was published by our institute at the end of last year. and of course, which I hope you all also received. The publication of the book offered an appropriate opportunity to prepare a meeting of some of the representatives and members of the CESP, which would, adding the several supplementary aspects to what had monographically already been discussed, attempt to illuminate, with regard to the problem of the social, the specificity of the development of the phenomenological movement in the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. The notion of such a gathering seemed all the more sensible since it likewise allows the members of the new executive committee, Professor Jaroslava Vidrova, Professor Christian Ciocan, and myself, who were elected after last year's annual conference of the CESP in Novi Sad in an online voting procedure, to meet in person with the previous leadership of the CESP, which Professor Ciocan is also a member of the previous leadership, but with us here are also, as was also already mentioned, Professor Witold Płotka and Professor Uldis Wegners, I'm sorry. So this was sort of like an opportunity to exchange some experiences and debate any quote-unquote business matters at hand. As the title seeks to suggest, the predominant purpose of the conference is to retrace the resonance the phenomenological conceptions and conceptualizations of sociality may have encountered and continue to encounter within the philosophical circles of Central and Eastern Europe. Not only does the prolific, multifaceted history of phenomenology bear witness to the confluence of theoretical and practical thought that procured invaluable insights into the fundamental elements concerning the constitution of the social, but also the contemporary reconsideration of both its past achievements as well as its present and as well as its future challenges with respect to the effectuation of human and humane coexistence within today's world, conveys the relevance and the liveliness of the movement as one of the essential philosophical orientations of today, which, albeit pluricentrally scattered almost around the globe, still exerts influence on certain, principally, of course, humanistic fields within the realm of the academia and beyond. However, if the acuteness of the actual situation of humanity, confronted with an overwhelming array of crises, war crises, medical crises, economic, ecological crises, which are threatening to almost terminally tear apart the already fragile fabric of what nationally, internationally binds the people and the peoples of the world as a potential, if who knows, maybe a possible, and who knows, maybe even an impossible community. So which binds them together, once more, as always, calls for and calls forth. That means requires a response. How can then philosophy, with its ways of philosophical questioning, how can Central and Eastern Europe, with its paths of historical experience, contribute to this conversation, to discuss the acuteness of the actual situation? Standing at a crossroads of pathways, one may encounter the enigma of a trace. If it, at least at first, cannot be decided whether it points backward or forward, right or left, downward or upward, it nonetheless remains as the scripture of a demarcation, a sign entreating and at the same time resisting comprehension, a sign that makes one pause to ponder. And it is the modest, or perhaps even an immodest wish of the organizers that this international conference on the traces of togetherness may, in its own fashion, facilitate such a considerate pausing, the repose of rethinking. In conclusion, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to both the director of the Institute Nova Revija for the Humanities, Mr. Tomáš Zelaznik, as well as the head of its research activities, Professor Dejan Komel, for generously supporting the initial idea in the following efforts to prepare the present event. Likewise, I would like to thank the staff of the Institute for all their organizational and administrative assistance. And above all, I wholeheartedly thank all the colleagues who are presenting at the conference for the profound friendliness of being willing to participate with their scholarly knowledge, with their gentle humanity in the ensuing philosophical discussions. I wish us all an engaging gathering and a pleasant stay in Ljubljana. So I thank you all for your amiable presence and for your gracious attention. Hvala. So our first speaker of the day is Professor Dr. Witold Płotka, who teaches at the Institute of Philosophy of the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw, in Poland. And he is also the former president of the Central and East European Society of Phenomenology. So, please.
Thank you, Andrei, for this introduction, and thank you for being here. I want to thank you and Nova Revija Institute staff for organizational effort to organize this event, and thank you for invitation. My paper will explore a meta-philosophical issue. It is the question of how shall we understand some essential features of the phenomenological movement. As we all know, the term phenomenological movement was popularized by Herbert Spiegelberg in his excellent handbook of the history of phenomenology. For him, this term is useful in describing of what phenomenology is, since it shows phenomenology as a vibrant tradition in which phenomenology is comprehended, as Spiegelberg puts it, with a dynamic momentum. By contrast, the term school, which is commonly used to refer to certain traditions, is inadequate in regard to phenomenology, as it suggests that phenomenology is a fixed theory which requires teaching and not studying. In my paper, I want to focus on this dynamic nature of the phenomenological movement by examining an immanent nomen omen movement which directs one toward a community of philosophers. My thesis is as follows. Within Husserl's phenomenology, there is a significant tension between the call for rigorous examinations and a belief that we, as human beings, are fallible. For this very reason, we have to overcome limits of individual privileged experiences and discuss results we achieved with a communal effort that characterizes the phenomenological movement as a whole. This thesis, on a very different level, is perfectly illustrated, at least to me, by how phenomenologists organize their work in this part of Europe, in Central and Eastern Europe. My paper is structured as follows. First, I will discuss topics which show that a solitary perspective has to be overcome. I will focus in this regard on the problem of linguistic expression of the phenomenological results. I will refer not only to Husserl, but to Eugen Fink as well. Next, I will refer to the idea of philosophia perennis and the idea of co-philosophizing. In conclusion, I want to contextualize my results within the phenomenon of the phenomenological movement in Central and Eastern Europe. So I'm going to first part of my talk from a monologue toward a community. Phenomenology understood as a method calls for a re-verification and re-examination of previously achieved results. It requires that problems should be opened and addressed again. In this part of my paper, I will try to demonstrate how the application of some elements of Husserl's method makes it necessary to communalize investigations and carry out phenomenological analysis through discussions and conversations. To this end, I suggest to analyze the way in which dispute is an immanent property of phenomenology. To show this, one can highlight the practice of Husserl's analysis, which, as we know, was carried out through a stenographic description of subsequent stages of experience. At the point of departure, the philosopher is thus engaged in an individual and solitary reflection on what appears or manifests itself. However, the very fact that she later presents the results of these reflections at the community level in the form of a description, which after all uses a medium of language, is testament of phenomenology's immanent tendency toward community. Description is not a theory that cannot be subjected to discussion and verification. Rather, it is an impulse for discussions about its adequacy. It would be difficult to deny that a phenomenologist in her individual description could have made mistakes, omitted some important properties of a given phenomenon, or simply failed to give justice to some steps of the method developed by Husserl. Even if the method does provide tools for an adequate description of experience, a phenomenologist using these tools is fallible. This means that by its very nature, each description is not fully reliable, and as such, it is open to intersubjective verification and discussion. As a consequence, we are faced with two extremes. The initial solitude of the philosopher versus his later incorporation into a community, or the monologue of a description versus the dialogue of the dispute about the adequacy with which a given experience has been analyzed. Both these extremes are based on two models for the understanding of the phenomenological method: monologue-oriented and dialogue-oriented. This tension is evident given the horizontal constitution of phenomena. Variation and description cannot be finished once and for all. After all, the horizon of phenomena, by its very nature, cannot be given in full and in a single moment. Rather, the horizontal embedding of the phenomenon, it is the horizontal structure of consciousness, means that experience keeps changing as it can never be ultimately full. This explains the importance of studies carried out by a community of researchers and philosophers who try to arrive at a full description of what is given. This is why the phenomenological description plays in a new area of experience by epoche would have to lose the status of a philosophical description if presented in a natural form. According to Eugen Fink, this paradoxical structure does not mean that phenomenology is impossible, but constitutes its important feature, the structure of transcendental investigations, clearly visible in the case of the transcendental highlighting of the monologue and solitude of the philosopher, takes us back to the wall of the natural attitude. In this context, Fink speaks in his sixth Cartesian meditation about unfolding of the transcendental ego, when, to cite the words of Fink, the phenomenologizing philosopher notices that she is the same as the person who really acts in the surrounding reality. The process is also accounted for as self-objectification of philosophizing. Fink's account was undoubtedly supported and accepted by Husserl, who observed in one of his remarks on the sixth Cartesian meditation that the genesis of phenomenological science takes two forms. On the one hand, there is the I engaged in reduction and conducting investigations in solipsistic attitude. With reference to this, Husserl poses the following question: how far can this solipsistic phenomenology reach? Regardless of the answer, it is necessary for the description made by the transcendental phenomenologist to be recognized through verification by the community of philosophers. This is why, on the one hand, there is a community of phenomenologists who carry out reductions together, but remain conscious of the community dimension of their investigations in the modus of we phenomenologists. In other words, coming back to Fink's analysis, transcendental reflection not only must begin with the natural attitude by suspending it, it is by defining the assumptions of this attitude clearly, but also, and first, foremost, it must come back to it, not only suspending, but also come back to natural attitude. A phenomenologist always philosophizes for other philosophers, with whom she shares a transcendental community and with whom she philosophizes. I'm going to second part of my talk, Phenomenology as Philosophia Perennis. In one of his letters, Husserl wrote that there is nothing more beautiful in this dark world than co-philosophizing. It is precisely this concept of phenomenology as a philosophical movement based on a community of communicating and discussing philosophers that very much meets the requirements of Husserl's idea of Philosophia Perennis, the only authentic philosophy. Husserl understands the latter in two ways. On the one hand, Philosophia Perennis is located in infinity as an idea, so Kantian understanding of Philosophia Perennis. On the other, Husserl stresses that Philosophia Perennis should be understood as an authentic research system which accounts for itself as an element of ongoing progress. The second understanding underlines the relationship between Philosophia Perennis and the real practice of philosophers oriented toward a common, achievable goal of community-based investigation. It must be underlined that the account of phenomenology as investigation that is community-based does not preclude the solipsistic initial stage of investigation. Surprisingly, a perfect illustration of the immanent movement of phenomenology from a monologue to community-based philosophizing is provided by Cartesian Meditations, a work that, on the face of it, seems to present only the solipsistic account of philosophizing. In the introduction to his work, Husserl complains about the condition of philosophy in general. As seen by Husserl, the crisis of philosophy consists in creating philosophical literature. As a consequence, the crisis entails a lack of cooperation among philosophers striving to work out common solutions. On the other hand, the aim of such cooperation would be to obtain a more precise criticism of one's views, so these views are better and more resistant to criticism. A monologue should therefore give rise to a phenomenological community which would develop a common philosophy by means of its practical actions and make philosophia perennis possible. In other words, once we understand the methodological foundations of reduction, we can gain an in-depth understanding of the phenomenological movement as such. I believe that one remark is necessary here to give justice to the complexity of the phenomenological movement. It is not my intention to claim that Husserl's dream of one single phenomenology has come to an end and announce contemporary multiplicity of equally valid phenomenological narratives. If that was the case, different conceptions advanced by heretics would offer separate and incommensurable propositions of doing phenomenology. As a result, each of them and many others would in fact be undiscussable, while the categories of adequacy or truth would have to be replaced, for example, by attractiveness of description or inventiveness. In this context, it seems that the right approach to describing the phenomenological movement would be to recognize a major tension between one and many phenomenologies. According to the diagnosis from the Cartesian Meditation, and I quote, the philosophical literature drives out a serious discussion of conflicting theories. As a result, we have pseudo-reporting, pseudo-criticism, or, as Husserl explains, the semblance of philosophizing seriously with one for another. It is philosophizing where one philosopher communicates something to another. End of quotation. Husserl believes that philosophy lacks discussion, conflict, or dialogue. It is not a futile exchange of views, but an authentic dispute. If we adopt a vision of equally valid phenomenological discourses, any dispute becomes meaningless. We should not forget, however, that there can be no authentic dispute without different visions and propositions. Hence, the phenomenological movement is constituted neither by one dominant phenomenology, nor by the multiplicity of autonomous discourses, but by the tension between these two poles. one phenomenology establishes the field of possible research and discussions, providing a foundation for different descriptions, a set of eidetic judgments, rather than an exposition of the entire system. Judgments themselves may be imprecise or unclear, and as such, they must be specified through co-philosophizing. In this respect, we may conclude that many phenomenologies clash in disputes, creating one phenomenology as a result. Consequently, different phenomenologies are not equally valid monologues, different phenomenologies, but discussible and, generally speaking, verifiable propositions that have to be subjected to discussion in the name of authentic science. The point of one phenomenology is not to decide in advance which kind of this philosophy should be rejected, but rather to engage in co-philosophizing, understood as bottom-up philosophizing about phenomena themselves and their related problems. Thus, the common effort of philosophizing, not only within the phenomenological movement, but also in relation to other philosophizing propositions, helps to identify some philosophical conceptions are false or true. I'm going to conclusion. My paper has aimed at describing some essential features of the phenomenological movement, namely an immanent telos of phenomenology which leads one toward a community. This intention is fully expressed in the thesis about the fallibility of philosophers. As has already been mentioned, a philosopher must recognize her fallibility as a condition of her thinking. In short, and sorry for saying this, phenomenologists are fallible. Husserl refers to this aspect, mentioning the phenomenon of horizontally constituted experience. By its nature, by its essence, experience presents more than what is given directly. This is why the solitary relation to the of the philosopher to experience must be finally overcome on the way to community-based and intersubjective verification of experience and description of this experience. The result that stems from Husserl's phenomenology rests on the assumption that there is no view from nowhere. There is no position of a master which transcends every possible prejudice and assumption. What this also means is that the findings or results of phenomenology are temporary, being open to verification and discussion within a community of philosophers. I think that this very essence of phenomenology makes the phenomenological movement so vibrant community, especially in Central and Eastern Europe. What we are dealing with is a constant movement toward communal efforts in doing phenomenology. And no other task is manifested with our meeting today. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your speech, which in itself, as a sort of like a dialogical proposition, invites to discussion. So I would like to open. We already have two. Please, Christian.
Thank you. You mentioned the tension between monologue and dialogue.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you could put near these two categories the idea of soliloquium. Because monologue is like, we can imagine a monologue like I start talking. And like the water goes. But in soliloquium it's a debate with myself. It's already a preliminary dialogue and debate with myself.
That's an interesting idea. But I borrowed this term and this idea of monologue, it's from Husserl and logical investigations, in which he uses this idea of monologue and monologische Subjekt.
Yes, but in the fact of philosophizing, of understanding, there is a tension of myself with myself.
Right.
And I think the idea of monologue is too simple, because behind that there is a struggle. There is a struggle with myself, the struggle with the things themselves, and this effort finally can arrive to a monologue, what I have to say as a philosopher. That's one point. And other point I want to question if when you say, of course, we are all, fallibility is our condition, but if we assume that as a thesis, as a main principle, doesn't lead us to a kind of skepticism of I'm fallible, so I can understand nothing because I'm under fallibility. There is a kind of trust in what I think, what I understand, and this trust can be that I can touch a little bit, a pellicle of the so-called truth of what I'm thinking. If not, I will have no longer the strive to understand, because you have this passion for understanding only if you have not that skepticism. Anyway, it's useless, we are fallible. I think we need also this trust in the understanding of the individual, because it's as Husserl said, forget about Heidegger, he's arrogant, he's the only one, he orders the history of metaphysics and but I think there's also this moment of trusting in the individual. If we say only the community can reach the truth and the individual is, then I think maybe you can use a dialectical schema from individual to the community. Again, an individual who provokes the community, and it's like a spiral. Because the community can be also, we have the truth well established, the scholasticism of the knowledge. It's well known, so what do? We need to challenge this community. So it's a debate, it's a circularity here. I see this. So I would defend the individual, because of course we strive for the community, but we strive for the community in which we as individuals can continue to be individuals, not thank you.
Okay. But indeed, if you, I will start with the second comment. If you adopt this view of circularity between individual and community, so community also changes. If you comprehend community as a collection of soliloquizing subjects, it's different than you comprehend community as a dialogical subject, and I think that the clue of this idea of how to do phenomenology is indeed in this tension. I mentioned few times, and I think it's somehow comparable to your idea that there is no easy solutions, no easy answers to problems, because all you said. I would so I think that this thesis about fallibility somehow is tricky, because of course the thesis that I'm fallible itself is infallible. So it's transcendental thesis that humans are fallible. So from the very beginning, within the phenomenological philosophy, from the very beginning you can achieve this level, but the problem is not that you as, you know, individual, this master, this genius philosopher can achieve the truth. Okay, that's it, and dinner right now. So I think that within the phenomenological work, you have to be conscious. Okay, so this is the result. So this is my idea, and now let's discuss this idea, right? So you. And of course, if you are, for example, applying to publish an article, and you adopt this vision that, okay, I have this privileged access, and I can absolutely trust to my abilities to describe this phenomenon, and all of a sudden you receive 3 very critical reviews, which, you know, question your point of view. Is it so? What can you do right now? And I think that this idea I developed, I struggle with this paper, is that you have to think not only trust to yourself, but also trust to community. That there is, you know, a general goal that we all exchange ideas, we want to discuss. So this is my proposition to understand this phenomenon. Of course, it's strong. There are some ideas, but maybe you can consider this or that. So different perspectives, because in the essence of experience is this openness, or being not complete, I would say. So I agree with you, and probably this Rickerian vision that this is a kind of spiral which goes to truth or false cognition. It's adequate probably, but I don't know whether. So probably let's take some descriptions. For example, very general description of intentional act, whether this holds or not. So probably it's very good description, useful to understand many forms of experience. But is it what is the status of this this cognition? So this was the idea. The idea was presented. The idea was somehow discussed, verified, right? And due to the whole process, we can call that it's true that consciousness is intentional by its very nature or by its essence, right? So this was my idea, and my intention wasn't to exclude this monologue stage of phenomenology. So it goes to the first comment. I think it can be useful to use this Augustinian idea that you are struggling with something. So, but even you use this Hegelian concept that you are struggling with something bigger, which incorporates your thinking. I think this is precisely this idea that you have to present description. It's somehow surprising at the very beginning that Husserl didn't want to stop. Okay, you have intuitive cognition of some phenomena, so stop there. Okay, you have this intuitive insight into phenomenon, and that's it. No, you have to describe. And while describing, you already participate in the intersubjective community, because it's language, right? There is no such thing as private language. So even your thinking is, I agree with you fully, it's embedded in community. So it's struggling with community from the very beginning. Especially if you want to describe a very rare or unusual phenomenon. It's very hard to pick up right words. And this is the moment you are struggling, but later, okay, this is my offer to describe this phenomenon. Try this, right? Verify this, offer something better. And after many stages, I would say maybe this description is more adequate. And so my intention was not to devaluate solipsistic stage of phenomenology, but show that this is one of the stages, that this is not, aim in itself, I would say. Thank you for those comments.
Yeah, it was Professor Prole first, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, my first question is actually a dilemma related to well-known Husserl's expression philosophical literature.
Yeah.
Which is meant like, the way I see, like prideful exaggeration towards literature in terms of powerful philosophy on one hand and powerless literature on the other. And having in mind definition of phenomenology, even proposed by Fink, you mentioned that phenomenology is a kind of descriptive analytics of intentionality. We can say that a literate could be a phenomenologist in the same way.
Yeah.
And we can mention some of them, like Thomas Bernhard, Marcel Proust, like Peter Kantke, like a phenomenologist. My question would be, or my dilemma would be, why a kind of philosophical literature should lead to conflicting theories? The way I see it, it's totally wrong. Husserl was fallible as well. I from the very beginning, when I first saw it, I was like perplexed in terms of it doesn't work. It doesn't. I personally experienced it a kind of resentment related to Martin Heidegger personally, not like a description of contemporary philosophical theory or situation. But that was my, let's say, my assessment. That's the dilemma. I'm interested in what could you offer in return. And the second is a question. Once Husserl said to Love Shester. Love Shester made a connection with Paris, and Love Shester played a role in so-called Cartesian meditation. And as far as I remember, it was a conference in Amsterdam. And Husserl said in one of his commentaries that what is Love Shester doing, that's the self-reflection, Selbstbesinnung.
Yeah.
That's kind of phenomenology as well. Could you tell us, could you imagine if Love Shester accepted this kind of compliment or some kind of...
That's tricky.
Yeah,
because this is not the only case when Husserl tried to impute someone that he's doing phenomenology. So Rudolf Otto, the same. So does Heidegger perfect
religious thinkers.
Perfect phenomenological description of religious experience, and Otto said no. That's good philosophy, right? But why you have to call this phenomenology? And I think that those attempts you mentioned, so the conference in Amsterdam in the 20s, at the end of the 20s, and later exchange at the beginning of the 20s, exchange with Rudolf Otto, I think that Husserl somehow wanted to have a school. So probably this was the reason why he imputed to other thinkers that they are phenomenologists. So you are phenomenologists, you are my follower, right? So why you are my follower? Because my philosophy is so important.
I disagree, because his point was relatively open. Phenomenology is self-reflection. It's not that precisely related to his way of thinking.
But at that time, self-reflection was somehow
open idea of
it was in Statum Ascendi because it was used at the end of the 20s in the Formalum Transcendentalogik. So I think this was another idea to conceptualize phenomenology as a unique insight, which is different from descriptive psychology and so forth. So I'm quite skeptical. So I don't think whether there is something behind your question. I mean essential about phenomenology, that there can be indeed something unique in Lev Shestov of Rudolf Otto's philosophy, which is unique for phenomenological in the sense of Husserl. I think generally that phenomenology is very good philosophical tool because it's general. You can use this in many districts, and I think that I would be skeptical, and I would defend my position that probably Husserl's intention at the conference, so he travels and he puts to others, oh, you're using phenomenology. So I remember when he went to London, and he said, okay, where is Russell? Because he's doing good phenomenology. You know, Russell and phenomenology, can you imagine? No, so I think that he wanted to present his philosophy. This was a kind of struggle to give this heritage, to say something, you know, very unique, and he hired Eugen Fink to keep the archive, to present this archive, and he spoke to further generations of philosophers. So I'm quite skeptical.
Okay, but what about completely theories?
Yeah, completely theories. I didn't understand this this fragment in the context of literature as such. Of course, this, as you said, this historical context and the dispute with Heidegger is one of the obvious answers. But I would reply in non-obvious way. I would say that this philosophical literature he mentions here goes back to his studies in Würzburg. You know, under Karl Stumpf and idea of Lotze and new way of doing philosophy as a science. And philosophical literature is, you know, literature in sense that you assess literature as beautiful or non-beautiful, so aesthetic. But science is about true or false, right? So I think that his attack on philosophical literature, why this is the crisis, is that philosophical literature, you produce papers, you produce books, no one reads them, right? No one comments.
Who is literate?
Sorry?
Who is that precisely? If we follow your way of explanation,
right,
we should pinpoint some guys. Who is that?
You mean just like with Heidegger, right?
No, anybody. Not necessarily Heidegger.
Oh, I would risk going back to the second comment that probably all non-Husserlian thinkers I would risk. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, especially at the end of the 20s, I'm not sure whether... So Husserl gave up this project of systematization of phenomenology with Cartesian meditation, and okay, Eugen, you can take over this project and write something complete and systematic on this issue. I would say that he was very dissatisfied, just like Lotze. Lotze was the only, you know, in the middle of 19th century, Lotze was the most quoted German philosopher in the world, and he didn't establish a school, right? And when Husserl moved from Göttingen to Freiburg, he realized that the best students were in Göttingen. So for this reason, he hired Stein, who started studies in Göttingen. He established cooperation with Ingarden, even though all those students didn't accept transcendental point of view of phenomenology, right? So they rejected this point of view because I think somehow this transcendental transcendental phenomenology at that stage was very vague. So if you follow letters of Göttingen Circle students, so they exchanged a lot letters. You know, today at the lecture, Husserl was lecturing on this reduction. Do you know what is reduction? No idea. What is reduction? So, but to be honest, reduction is probably the only element which differentiates early phenomenology, descriptive phenomenology, and transcendental phenomenology as a different point of view. What does it mean that someone performed reduction? I remember I studied some texts from the 50s and 60s of Polish phenomenologists, and one reviewed another text and said, no, you didn't apply reduction correctly. And that guy replied, no, you didn't you didn't apply reduction correctly. But reduction is, in this sense, you know, it's very hard to define, because it's different way of doing philosophy, as Husserl states at the beginning of Ideas 1. And you're asking about this philosophical literature, and I think that Husserl didn't want to make this literature because he wanted to make something essential. And after Ideas 1, he published only Transcendental, Formale und Transzendentale Logik, and that's it. And he published French edition of Cartesian Meditation, and he worked on German edition, which was never published during his life, just after he died. The final version was published on the basis of his manuscripts. So probably this literature, I think it's a loose term. It's not technical term. Rather, it's a philosophical text which does not incorporate scientific tools. So you cannot judge it in the sense of true or false. Just like, and we're going back to Heidegger and Simon Side, you cannot judge it in terms of true or false, but only in terms of authentic and inauthentic, right? So even his proposition, it somehow supplements this this vision that you can judge or assess some descriptions that they are adequate or inadequate. Okay, but are they true or not? So this is philosophical text in the sense that it's not literature gives you opportunity to judge it as true or false, I would say. Mm-hmm. And philosophical literature.
Bear that in mind, if you're right,
yeah.
What should that lead to? Conflicting theories.
Yeah. So the process, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That was my point, actually.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Why?
Yeah, and I remember the private notebook of Fink from the time when he cooperated with Husserl. So they discuss about community, we phenomenologists, and so on and so forth. But in his private notes, he said, you know, phenomenology is fine, but I have some worries about my cooperation with Husserl, because to my experience, I think that Husserl comprehends us, so I, Eugen Fink, and he, Edmund Husserl, as two weasels. One, you know, gives voice, and the second repeats the same. And that's not conversation. They were paradoxically building a community, but this community was false in the sense that it was rather Husserl-oriented, centered on Husserl. So this conflicting ideas in Husserl's text, those are presented as some ideas, or some, his vision of doing philosophy, but generally, paradoxically, in the practice, how he used phenomenology. Paradoxically, he didn't expect conflict. He didn't expect a student who said, "No, Edmund, you are wrong. Oh my God, go to France and do PhD just like Jean Wahl in France and not in Germany, because, you know, You are too conflicting. But my in this paper, I do not believe that, or my task was not to follow Husserl's text, but the essence of the phenomenological movement as such,
for sure.
right?
For sure.
So I think that these conflicting ideas, conflicting theories. Of course, this is the term of Husserl used in
I think
introduction.
they're not existing, they're construction.
Yeah, construction.
Following
In this
the
sense,
logic of
not
the
systems, not
Yeah.
systems
Yeah.
in this sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have 2 more questions, but should we? Yeah, we have some time.
Definitely.
Yeah. So since the 3rd lecture is not. So if also the next speaker is willing to wait a little more, we can take, let's say, 2 more questions. Okay. First was Ulrich, right?
Thank you, Witold, for your presentation. I'm actually quite sympathetic to your goal and your ethos, and I think that yes, phenomenology has to be done in an intersubjective, communal way as well. And my question was about this sentence you had about different phenomenologies not being equally valid. Yeah. Different phenomenologies not being equally valid, monologues, but discussable and verifiable propositions. And my question was about the use of the term verifiable. Does it have any specific meaning? Like technical? Is it a technical word? Or like generally? So is there any method? Is there any phenomenological method how you can make some propositions verifiable or not? Or was it just like very broadly used term? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. So verifiable judgment is the judgment that can be verified. So you have a judgment X which states something, and it's verifiable that it is a hypothesis which is judged in the light of experience. So in a technical term, this verification means that experience approves or rejects, verify this judgment. So this is the technical term of verification. I do not remember because this term verification, it was commonly used at the end of 19th century, and Husserl suspended this language after writing logical investigations because of discussions with Wundt, also with Karl Stumpf, who after publishing of logical investigations presented his view of phenomenology, and in Ideas 1 Husserl attacked this, and we remember that logical investigation was dedicated to Karl Stumpf, right? So verification for them, this term was understood in a technical sense as a possibility of assessing whether it holds or not. And experience. In phenomenological sense, what verifies a judgment is experience, I would say.
I was asking because you sort of bring this communal intersubjective aspect that sort of is this something sort of every phenomenological proposition which is made is discussable and like intersubjectively maybe verifiable, and how then it differs from so does it imply the same thing? For example, when it's intersubjectively verifiable, does it also imply this,
so intersubjectively
with experience, or is it like propositional coherence or
no, look, just a very simple very simple example. So let's imagine I don't know, blue elephant. By the way, we saw blue elephant today. So let's imagine. What is imagined? So what is the object of this act? And I would say that every imaginative act has the imaginative object. So that's the phenomenological rule. And how to verify? By experience. What does it mean? That everyone who understands this thesis can try to imagine blue elephant, and is blue elephant the object of my imaginative experience, or is it only fake impression that there is an object in my imaginative experience? In this sense, you can verify intersubjectively, because this thesis is linguistic. So it's available for everyone who understands this language. So in this sense, everyone can verify this phenomenological thesis.
Thank you.
Tomasz?
Just a short question. You speak about community.
Yeah.
How do you define community? Because, as Dragan said, community through eyes from Thomas Bernhard.
Yeah.
We have this community is now very popular.
Yeah.
In all ways. So how do you define this community? Because I don't believe that it's only one community. Or what is community?
Yeah. Yeah. Very good question. Very good question. But I worry that I do not have any good answer to this question, because for me it was rather this idea of community. It was somehow opposition for monological subjects. So community, and this community also was used. This term was used by Fink and Husserl, and by Husserl himself in Cartesian meditations as well. But how to understand community as such? It's a huge and very good question. So ad vocem, I would say maybe community probably is a new. This is not only a combination of different
We
subjects.
should talk in plural, communities,
Right.
not community, because community is too narrow,
Yeah.
and communities
Yeah.
are developing.
Yeah.
And Thomas Bernhard
Yeah.
is
Yes,
a
of
perfect
course.
example of definition of community.
Right.
If you talk about it, so, but let's
But from phenomenological point of view, I think that the question should address the problem: what is essential about different communities which make them communities, right? And this issue, whether use this term in plural or in singular, it's I think it's not so important. From phenomenological point of view, would be so the question would be, what is the essence of community which makes some kind of group of subjects community itself, right? Regardless of political stance, regardless of economical situation, and so on and so
But
forth.
then you could define the problem:
Right.
person versus community,
Yeah,
or persons versus communities.
yeah,
So here you have different relationships.
yeah.
But
Yeah, for sure. But this would be what Husserl calls regional ontology of community.
tomorrow.
Yeah, or for next
Yes.
100 years.
Thank you.
So thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.